Man, I can't believe we're 6 episodes into season 2 of Bro, the Interrogation series. And I have a very special guest for you today. This guy right here is one of my very dear friends in the improv comedy community here in Columbus, Ohio. You may know him as my co-host of the Alternative Hacks, Social Distance Warriors. He is, again, an amazing dude, an amazing comedian. He is the one, the only, Rob Moore. Welcome him to the show with a warm round of applause.
Thanks for having me, Barack. It's fun to be on this. I haven't been on Bro since we were in level 3 together at the Nest.
Man, it's been a while. We were discussing that earlier. You came back after the hiatus during season 1, after we had the missing guest, the guest that disappeared. You were the first guest we had on season 1. On the return episode.
Yeah,
and
it was fun getting on there, and that was my first it wasn't my first podcast in Columbus, but it was my first in a while. I wasn't doing a lot of podcasting before that, so it was cool to get that. It was definitely my first Columbus podcast company podcast.
I'm happy that I could help. I'm happy that I could be there to experience your first Columbus improv podcast. But you did say you had some apprehension on your walk to the studio to record the episode. Is that right?
That's true, because I was listening to the most recent episode, which had the missing guest, and there was a nice 15-minute lead-in at the very start of that with all the explanation of how there was a missing guest. And I was like, oh God, am I going to go missing after this? Who knows?
Man, one of these days I'm going to have to talk about it, because the amount of fucks I have to give about upsetting anyone by telling the events that happened that day have just reduced significantly. That will be a story for another day. It won't be for today. You know the story, and some people out there know the story, but one day you will know who the missing guest is and why they were the missing guest. Until then, you hold on tight. But that's the future. Today, we have one focus only. As you can see by the walls around us, we are in the interrogation room. It's a new facility that we had built for this week's episode. This maniac, nice. It is nice. You know, when you have somebody like Rob Moore on, a complete moron. That's good. But when you have a person like Rob on, you need to have top of the notch security, because the man is a certified lunatic.
It's true. That's definitely true.
It's true. So what is it that you do professionally speaking, Rob?
So we've talked about this a little bit before, but I'm a public policy analyst, which means that when I try to explain this at its very simplest, I try to see if laws work. That's my job.
I think you had chocolate milk on your beard.
I got some nice homemade chocolate milk right here. I got some Hershey's. Oh, wait, it's kind of falling into the background of the photo here too. Wait, here we go. Some Hershey's chocolate and some whole milk from Kroger's.
Cheers.
Oh wait, here we go. Cheers.
All right, but yes, tell me about what you do professionally, please.
So I do tax and budget policy, economic development, and social safety net, like social policy. And basically try to see if laws work and how to improve them and how to make laws more efficient, equitable, effective, etc.
All right, so now explain that to me like I'm 5.
Oh man, how do I get more simple than I try to see if laws work? So, basically people ask me, hey, if I want to do something right, how do I do it? And I try to guide them in that as much as I can, using evidence on what's worked before.
Nice sheet. History doesn't always repeat itself, but it can rhyme, right?
Yeah.
Are you a believer in that?
Yeah. I mean, it's the best. It's a better guide than just totally guessing as to what's going to happen in the future, right?
That is true. Now, speaking of history, now you and I did not meet because of your public policy work. We met because of your comedy work, your improv work. Tell me about your history performing comedy, and is it connected at all with your pursuit of your public policy work?
Oh yeah, that's okay. So my first theater experience was in the 5th grade play at Castingham Elementary in Bexley, Ohio. I had a non-speaking role, and I was a farmer in the song "Dusty Old Dust." I was so afraid that I was like, "Please don't make me do a speaking role." So I just walked across the stage basically, and I also did lights for that. So I was tech and an actor in that one. Didn't do any theater all the way until my senior year of college, where I had one line in a student one act. And then I had a lot of friends who did improv in college. And then after I graduated from college, I had friends who went to places like New York and LA and Chicago, and they're taking improv classes all over the place. So I was like seeing that happen. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then I was in Omaha, and I was working a job that I really didn't have much creative control over, and I wanted to like try something new. So I signed up for improv classes at the Backline Improv Theater there. Enjoyed them. Ended up taking all 5 of their classes just back to back to back to back to back. And then I performed a little bit with on some stage shows there and hung out with that crew a bit. And then when I went to grad school on the West Coast and got involved with improv theater there in Oakland, California. And that's where I got on a house team and really started doing improv a lot from there. And then I did a little bit of improv in Denver when I was there for a summer, stayed on that house team in Oakland. And then finally, when I moved back to Columbus, that's when I got involved in the Nest Theater and started getting acquainted into the Columbus community. And yeah, just about a year and a half ago that I got together with the folks and started the Slumberjacks. So we've been touring for about, a little over a year now, and practicing for about a year and a half.
So based on what you've explained to me, you've done improv in several different locations in the United States. Would you say different locations have their own flavor of improv? Is there anything that changes when you go from one area doing improv in a different area, or is it pretty universal?
Yeah, I mean, something that really sets up a city like Columbus apart from a city like Oakland or Omaha is that Oakland and Omaha, at least when I was there, were really one theater towns. So like if you were at the Backline Improv Theater, you'd be doing improv, but if you weren't there, you really weren't doing improv in town in Omaha. Same with Oakland at the time. They had Pan Theater there, which was really like the place to do improv there. And if you wanted to do improv somewhere else, you had to go across the bay to San Francisco. In Columbus, and that's changed a bit. I've been back to Oakland since then. It seems like their scene is kind of growing up a little bit there. But coming back to Columbus, I mean, there are like, at least before coronavirus, you could see improv on probably half a dozen stages any given week. And there were just, there's the Nest Theater, which has always got a couple, a few shows a week. There's places like the Mad Lab. There was the ongoing improv comedy meetup at Gresso's. A lot was happening up at the Wild Goose Collective location, which shut down recently in Clintonville. A lot of stuff happening in Franklin Stages. Franklin Fridays had a great improv show hosted by Donut Sunday. There's some stuff that happened in the Vanderelli Room, just like places and places and places and places doing improv. And that's really different because in a place like Omaha or Oakland, like you really had to play with the theater or you couldn't play. While here, it's really like if you don't like one place, you can just go somewhere else. I didn't even talk about Hashtag. Like Hashtag Comedy has, had shows going on all the time. They're still doing stuff now over quarantine too.
I appreciate that insight. Now, I know you've done stuff with some of these theaters, but I also know that you're known in the Columbus improv circles as the weak link of the Slumberjacks. So can you tell us a little bit of how that team came together? Well,
there's always got to be a weak link, and you want to be the weakest person on the team rather than being the strongest, because you don't want to feel like you're holding it all on your back.
Not everyone can be a Jim Minnelli, I feel you.
Oh, yeah. Let everyone else carry you. That's what I always said. But to be honest, though, like I have felt like Slumberjacks is a fun team to be on because I feel like we're pretty balanced, and there's always a new person sort of taking the like front stage on like any given show. And I've always felt that way about improv teams that you hate going to a show and being like, man, if the bottom half of this team wasn't here, this would be a much better show, you know? And some, like a lot of improv shows you go to, you're like, man, I want to see the top half of this team because they're really good. And then the bottom half maybe like is just like off that night. I don't feel like that happens with Slumberjacks as much. We were really just an indie team that grew out of the improv meetup. We're all kind of meetup folks who have met up and at improv meetup at Gresso's and, you know, sort of scraped together, and in like basically January, February of last year said like, hey, we want to start a team. And
what brought all of you together specifically out of it? Because meetup, for those who haven't been there can be 20, 25, 30 people at a time. What brought you guys specifically together?
Really, I just started talking to people who I wanted to play with, you know, and I was like, hey, Jim, I love Jim and his characters and his accents and his like big personality. I love Eric's realism when he plays. Eric Johnson plays like very like real, like grounded characters. Joe was actually just a buddy of mine from college, and we had just played at a couple like jams at Mad Lab when Tuesday Night Improv was still happening with Brad Shimp. And he's just like a real natural improv talent. He's a really, really great improviser. And at the time, Rick Colby was one of the main folks, and he was kind of the guy who got Slumberjack started in a lot of ways because he was the one who was bugging me, saying like, "All right, let's just do it. Let's get it started." He's since left right now, and he's off doing other things. But he was a really instrumental person at the start of the team too.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, he created the team, brought you in. You then hijacked it from him and drove him away.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
No.
I just want to make sure everything's clear. We don't want any misconceptions or anything being misconstrued now. So.
No, Rick and I we were in level 1 at the Nest together, and we had sort of stayed in touch a lot since then. And I've been talking about trying to get an indie team together ever since my team that I was on at the Nest got dissolved by the folks who were over there. And then finally Rick was like, hey, Rob, just like pull the trigger on this and start it. So I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? Let's do it.
So it sounds like you went from the theater. I'm sorry. Were you not done?
I was just saying, I was starting my company at the time. So I was a little bit worried. My public policy analysis company. I was a little bit worried about starting an improv theater at the same time. I mean, an improv team at the same time, but Rick was just like, go for it,
No, for sure. So you went from performing mostly in theaters and all these different locations to producing pretty much your own team. What was that transition like, and would you say it's something that you prefer?
Yeah, that was something new, and that was always like sort of a barrier at a lot of these towns, especially these like one theater towns. You try to produce an indie team there, it can be kind of difficult. But here, there's a lot of places to play. So we got real lucky because I was talking a lot with, Josh Waddle came to a few of our first practices and stuff. And then he was basically, he's a member of Donut Sunday. And he was like, hey, you should come and play at Franklin Fridays Comedy, which is a show that they put on. They produce that every month. And that was our first show. And it was, a big success. Turned out like it was a really great show to kick it off. And then that kind of got the ball rolling for us. And then we did a bunch of improv wars. We did that. Altogether, we've probably played at, 7, 8, 9, 10 venues at this point. Like, because we've had a monthly show at least every month since May of last year. And some of those months we were doing 2 or 3 shows. So, and we didn't repeat all that much. I mean, we've done a lot of improv wars, which has been great. Improv wars ever since, Joel Savage and Savage Tech has taken it over. Has been, they put their whole wrestling spin on it. It's been a really cool, fun show that we've had a lot of fun being a part of. But yeah, it can be a lot. And, I got, we had Cale Hills on our show for Alternative Hack Social Distance Warriors. And he was always talking about how, folks feel like they've made it in LA when they're playing a weekly show that happens at the same time and the same place every week, because they don't have to spend all this time trying to book themselves, you know. And I kind of get that, because it's a lot of work to be booking. We do like being able to play at different places and to not necessarily feel tied to a theater, which is like, there's a benefit that comes to that. But then there's also, I mean, I was spending a lot of time in the winter booking shows, because we would just have people who are coming to us all the time, and you know, we're trying to figure stuff out. We'd be on a show and then we'd be like, okay, let's try to produce something a little bit different and like change it up. In our first year, we were really focused on just trying to do montages and just doing like, you know, just sort of doing like your bread and butter stuff. And then we started doing this choose your own adventure style show.
Balderdash, right?
Yep, Bandersnatch.
Bandersnatch.
Yeah, which is like a really audience-driven. It's like long form that has like a lot of audience participation, which is like kind of a hard balance to get, you know. And I feel like that's a really fun show. That was a show that came out of my team in Oakland, But then this year we started doing Herald. We started doing we do a date night show where two people who are dating will come up on stage and tell their story about, you know, how they started dating, and then we'll give them horns and bells, and then we try to act it out. And if we get something right, then they ding it. If they get something wrong, then they honk it. Just like playing with format, trying out new things. You know, and with this,
there's someone on the team that pushes, I guess, to change the formula and not just stick with a status quo, but to try different things, such as a date night.
That was Eric. Eric came up with the date night show. That was actually like wasn't Who's Line. There was another improv show that was a lot of the Who's Line folks did it, and he really liked it and was like, hey, we should do this for Valentine's Day. We're all like, sure, let's do it. And we ended up doing it, premiering it at a show at the King Arts Center, which was really cool. But then, yeah, like I've really been pushing for us to do more Herald, because that's something that I got to learn when I was first learning improv in Omaha, but like I haven't done since then. And we're doing, you know, we're trying out a lot of new concepts now, just like different kinds of things. Like we've been doing some like weird stuff with Savage Tech around the you know, Joel's presidential run, and we've got a really bizarre show that I'm pretty sure we're going to put on this month that we haven't announced yet.
Nice. And that's going to be a web-based show, socially distanced, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Are there any plans for you guys, you know, if the lockdowns are removed to some degree, of performing live again? Have you guys had conversations of what that looks like?
We would love to put on an outside show before the winter comes in, but I'm not terribly optimistic just with the way things have been going. But it'd be great to get on stage again before the year's up.
A little mass prov.
Yeah, I mean, if you did a show in Schiller Park on that stage and people are like just pulling out blankets and sort of sitting, you know, with their families 6 feet apart, like you could totally put on a show. It's, you know, improv really is a small club experience, so it's not like you're not doing it, like it's not optimal for improv, I don't think, but it would still be a step more optimal than Zoom, I think. You know, there's some cool Zoom shows out there, and I think like, you know, I thought what we were doing was like we were doing a pretty cool show, you know, with our audio format and podcasting, you know, and we had a blast. We did pretend this didn't happen with Kerouac Smith, right when the lockdown started, and that was really good timing because we had that planned for a few months, and then it happened to fall that time. We had a blast doing that. We've done a couple other shows with Kerouac too since then, and you know, he's such a great guy to work with, but you know, like you want to get up in front of people and you want to feed off the crowd. That's one thing that I think Zoom doesn't give you is audience feedback, and to be able to like, you know, see what they're responding to and like, oh, they're laughing, let's keep on like playing with this, and you know, having that sort of like banter back and forth with the audience is something that's really fun about a live show that you don't get from Zoom.
Yeah, and that's something that our guest last week, and I definitely recommend you guys check out that episode if you haven't, but we had Leslie Battle on last week, a comedian. She said the same thing, that with Zoom, that lack of audience participation really makes it difficult for to fully translate from the stage onto this virtual format. So it's interesting that you pretty much reiterated that same point. Now, moving on slightly, I do have to put it out that against your mom's wishes, you've become obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons. I know there were some concerns for your soul, and I may share some of those concerns, even though I am in a league, not a league, even though I'm in a campaign with you. I've let me dabble with the dark side. Tell me how this all came to be, and tell me about the new love of your life.
Well, you and I both have been able to, had some family members who have been a little bit worried about our new vice.
I did have to ask for permission to play. He's not lying. I don't want to go too deep into that, but I did need to put my foot down and say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put my soul on the line.
But you're right. It really is an obsession. I got asked. Well, I first tried to play Dungeons and Dragons when I was in high school at church camp, and I could not get through the player creation.
Church camp.
Yep. I had a friend who tried to turn me onto it there.
The devil's tricks.
I know, but I couldn't get through player creation. I didn't have the focus to do that. Really, I don't think I had the attention span. But man, do I now! I started playing. Ana Luisa from the improv community had pulled me into one of her campaigns that she's on, and she's our dungeon master now. And yeah, now I'm sitting here at the player's handbook right at my right to the left of me, and yeah, I think and you and I had a lot of conversations about this over the summertime when we were doing our show, where I've been like, I love improv. I have so much fun doing it. I've been doing it for like 7 years now, and I've been like craving the ability to sort of tell bigger stories with it, to do improv in a more, to carry a character past 3 minutes, and we do like Herald and mono scene and stuff. We can sort of stretch out characters into like more, and we've been playing with mono scene in Slumberjacks, which is one scene for the entire show, where you have people sort of step up on stage and off stage, and that's your edits, meaning no edits. It's the same people, same location, the entire show. And that's one way to sort of like get closer to that. But I've been blown away by how when you play Dungeons and Dragons, you have a character that not only do you play for 4 hours at a time, but then you're playing that character for episode after episode after episode. And you really get to like investigate that character's motivations and their background and how that character is going to respond to different situations. And on top of that, there's a whole strategic element to it, which doesn't really exist in improv. You have actual battles that have that have winners and losers and rules that you have to follow. And that's something like, I'm just like a very left brain thinker, and adding that element to it makes it like extra fun for me. So I'm happy that I've finally been turned on to it, because it's been a true obsession. Also, over quarantine, it's been a great change because you don't need big crowds for it. It's something that you just do with your friends, and you can even do it remotely and virtually. And I've been doing a couple campaigns virtually, and that's nice that you don't have to have the crowd element to it for it to work.
I will say, I believe the roughest patches of our friendship have come between the clashes that Duel and Baron have. Duel, my character, your character, Baron, unlike us in real life, seem to mix like oil and vinegar. It's ironic because you and I get along so well, so easily. But it's, I even told you, I'm not used to being so fucking annoyed by you, Rob. I'm pretty sure you felt the same.
Dude, I totally felt the same way. Isn't that so funny though? Like you and I, like from the very moment we met each other in level 3, we've just sort of seen eye to eye, and it just like, sort of like instantly meshed and we're friends. But like our characters in D&D, they have a icy relationship.
It's warmed up some. It
has.
There's hope there for character development.
Yeah. We got a lot to overcome, though. We have generations of of tribal differences between between our people to overcome.
I've really enjoyed it. It's cool. It's been a dope experience. So down for making the minis. That's kind of what made me get into it. You guys sent the Hero Forge website where you can mold a character. So I really invested a lot of time, made a cool character, how I wanted him to look. And then you made a backstory for your character and you shared it and I read it. And I thought it was really cool. And I'm like, I want to make a backstory for my character. And it's actually interesting because I read an interview, but I saw an interview with Michael B. Jordan where they asked him about his method as an actor. He said for the longest time he didn't really have a method. But now what he does is he writes about his character. He writes like their story. And he also writes from the character's perspective. And I view that having written Duel's backstory, I mean, like, I get it. It made me understand his motivations, where he's coming from, what his insecurities are, what his strengths are. It really made me flesh out his story. Fleshing out his story really helped me flesh out his emotions and kind of expand what I want to do with him. And in a weird way, even though it all seems random, everything does connect in a really cool way. So I've had a good time.
Dude, that's one thing I love about our group too, is like the campaign that you and I are on. It's you, me, and Jim. We've got 3 improv people there, and then we've got Ana Luisa, who is, she's in like the improv community, and she knows a lot about like storytelling and stuff like that. And it really feels like a very like actor forward group of people, and that I think that kind of adds like a different dynamism. Because I've heard people talk about playing Dungeons and Dragons in some groups, and it's just people trying to hack and slash the whole time, and just like they're just trying to kill everyone. And like ours is very much, it's about like relationships and motivations and backstories, and like it's a lot of soul searching.
There is,
and people getting really into their characters. Like, yeah, you've built such an awesome backstory for your character. Jim's character is amazing. Like everything he does cracks me up. Like he's just like this Don Quixote type character who just thinks he's always got to be the hero in every situation. And you missed the last session, but he was actually like having some personal breakthroughs in the last one, which were really awesome. We've got my intern roommate from last summer who is like playing this awesome half-elf sorcerer, and he is just like so in that character. I think he might role play more than we do, really. He's just like always playing as Nerwin whenever he's in. He is like so in character. It's awesome.
I think Nerwin is him.
He put a lot of himself into it. Yeah, and then I'm also playing with one of my best friends from like Michael and I have known each other since we were 10 years old, and it's fun. He's back here because of coronavirus. He's been living in New York and Copenhagen for the past 5 years. Now he comes back here, and we get to like play Dungeons and Dragons and like bond again. It's a really cool group of people.
Is Dungeons and Dragons something he was into before, or is this new for him as well?
He's never played before, but he's a real like closet fantasy nerd. Like we brought it up. He was just over here on 4th of July after you left, actually, and we brought it up, and he pulled out a dog-eared 1,000-page fantasy book that he was reading that's just like torn to shreds because he's read it so many times.
He exposed. He's like, right, there's something you need to know.
Yeah.
I'm one of you.
Yeah.
Cool guy.
And it's
Michael.
funny. It's
Shout
funny.
out to Michael.
Yeah, he is. It's funny because I've always thought of myself as more of a sci-fi person than a fantasy person. But there's something nice about fantasy where like I think sci-fi can be like so self-serious sometimes, And there's something about fantasy that's just like fun, It just puts the fun first.
I know they're different things, but there's part of my brain that almost wants to view them the same. I think it's because I played Warcraft, which would be fantasy, and I also played StarCraft,
yeah,
which would be sci-fi, and they're the same fucking game. And I can see the parallels in, oh, well, this race is this race, this race is this race. They're having these struggles. The magic here is the technology here.
Yep.
Going like this cool way I think I said I brought up sci-fi when I mentioned fantasy. And, you know, oh, that's fantasy, but it reminded me of that conversation, and that I think because of playing StarCraft and Warcraft, I almost view them as one and the same, just one in outer space and one in like medieval times.
Well, and Joe from Slumberjacks, Joe Kenkel, he'll tell you that Star Wars is not sci-fi because he sees it as fantasy. Because to him, like his definition of sci-fi is that it's about technology and what it means to human beings.
Uh-huh.
So like he's thinking of like Black Mirror as like what sci-fi is, you know. And he
Okay.
says like Star Wars, like the technology, exactly what you said. It's just magic, you know. There's no like explanation for it. It's just like we fly through space and we shoot aliens, you know. There's no like deep philosophical side to it, which is kind of what he associates with sci-fi, you know.
I mean, it's true if it's medieval times, and then maybe they call it a fire sword, and you don't. But now it's a laser sword, and you're like, oh, well, that makes it science.
It's like,
I can
okay,
see
whatever.
that. I can see that. I mean, they even tell you it's a long time ago,
Yep.
in a galaxy far, far away. And it's that galaxy of far, far away is what changed everything.
Yeah, totally.
But as you mentioned before, doing improv and doing Dungeons and Dragons, there are a lot of similarities. There's definitely some intersectionality between them. Would you say that one helps you be better at the other? Maybe does Dungeons and Dragons, do you think, make you a better improv performer?
You know, I haven't like gone back and done improv enough. I mean, like we have our Slumberjacks practices every couple weeks, and then we do a show a month, you know. But like it feels like still kind of sparse, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think that improv helps me with Dungeons and Dragons because I did not have the confidence to be able to really like play that like the game when I was 16 in high school because I think it was just too like that kind of creative thinking and stuff just didn't come naturally to me. I was always like, I like numbers, I like rules, I like games where I like NCAA football where you go out there and you pick a play and then you try to run it really well, you know? The whole like open-endedness of like create a character and then just see what they do, you know, was like way too abstract for me to get my head around. But like after having made up characters for the past 7 years, just over and over and over again, and getting more comfortable with just like speaking off the cuff, you know, the first year and a half that you do improv, you freeze up over and over and over again until finally you get to the point where you just stop freezing up because you're like, who cares? You just get over that. And now, you know, I take that to my character in Dungeons and Dragons, and like it's usually like me and a couple of the improv people who are the ones who like the DM describes something in the sky and we're all like looking up, you know, and like really like getting in the skin of the character, which is like the really fun, like exciting part for me.
That was really cool, I must say, having that aha moment with improv, because when you first witness it, and you know people that have reached that aha moment, but you haven't, and you witness the improv, it's mind-blowing to watch. It seems like magic. You think it's telepathic. You're like, wow, how are they connecting these dots? But then you do it, and then you realize there's almost it's complex, but there's a simplicity in the complexity that's hard to explain. It's almost like the metaphor I told you about a drawing. Like, the lines may seem simple, but there's like a depth to everything that you just can't replicate without actually doing the reps, actually putting in the time. But once you have and it all clicks, I can feel like I can do 100 improv sets and always have material, because man, there's so much material to go off of, and it's like you said, it's just not caring and not putting all these rules on yourself.
Yeah, and you got to know that like everyone's gonna be there to catch you. You know that if you stumble,
yes,
someone's just gonna take that and turn it into something even more funny. You know,
that's what's crucial. Knowing that if you do stumble, somebody has your back, and I guess if that faith and trust isn't there, I could see it being problematic. But when that trust is there, it's a beautiful thing.
but that's another like that you stumbling is kind of how the dice work in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
If you get a bad roll and something bad happens, like you can see that as like, oh, I screwed up, it's bad, like, oh, I lost. Or you can see it as like, wow, this is kind of an exciting thing that something crazy happened and now I got to live with the consequences, you know?
Like a good metaphor for life.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like you see people who they lose and then they sort of get down on themselves and they're like, oh, why am I so bad? And it's like, everybody loses. It happens to every single person. You lose at some point, and you don't have control over that. You know, that's just something that happens to people. And like, you can't take it as a reflection on yourself. You got to be like, all right, what do I learn from it? And how do I like grow from it? Because like, what kind of movie do you want to watch where the person just wins every time? You know, you want to like watch the movie where the person struggles and loses over and over again, then finally comes back and wins. That's a good story.
That actually reminds me of Superman. A lot of, I guess, criticism and lack of love that Superman has gotten over the years, just the fact that he's like so unbeatable that there's no real suspense to his stories just because he's a god pretty much, as opposed to someone like Spider-Man, who's a poor kid from New York who's young and trying to figure out being a teenager and a hero at the same time. It's easier for people to relate with that struggle and like the character more than someone they view like Superman, who has no real challenges from their perspective.
Yeah. And I always sort of bite back at people on that because, you know, someone like Spider-Man, yeah, well, everyone's got their tragic backstory as a superhero, you know, and like Spider-Man, like his is this his uncle who dies? Is that who it is?
Yes. His Uncle Ben.
Yeah.
I set you up, didn't I?
Superman's whole like people died. You know, his home died. Like, think of you go on vacation to Paris and then America is nuked and everyone is dead. Like, that is his cross to bear. And he, you know, we can talk all we want, like, oh, you know, well, he's like such a good superhero and he can fight everyone. Like, you never get your family back. You know, you never get like your people back, and that's something that he can't ever get back.
Okay, well, I guess I'll push back with this. So instead of using Spider-Man, let's use Batman. Because Batman, it wasn't his whole people, but he has the tragic backstory with his parents. Batman is also really beloved because with Batman, there's not that feeling of immortality. So there's this, as opposed to Superman, it's not that his backstory isn't tragic. It's that he's Superman. He's like, I don't know how else to put it, a god. He's almost impervious. So it's hard for a person to be able to relate to that. Batman having no superpowers, like, he's facing his mortality at any given moment just by being in a battle with someone like Superman. As opposed to when Superman goes into a battle with Batman, you're probably not going into it like, oh shit, like, I'm really worried for Superman's well-being.
Yeah, and I think that kind of might tie into the bigger thing that makes Superman unrelatable to people compared to Batman. People in America just relate to a rich guy for some reason. Everyone in America relates to a rich guy because they just see themselves as rich deep down. While like an immigrant who came to this country because his world got blown up and he has like nowhere to go, and so he's stuck here and is you know, maybe an immigrant who started a business and then is very successful here. Oh, people don't like that. People don't relate to that kind of person.
So you think people would find it hard to struggle with being like the most powerful being on the entire planet? You think that's just something they aspire to be rich, but not to be the most physically imposing? Have you ever met a man in your life, my friend? Have you ever been exposed to toxic masculinity? Because
you know what, I get exposed to plenty of toxic masculinity, more than I should be.
Are you being passive aggressive, my friend?
Ask me again 4 more times.
Now, so we know you're into improv. We know you're into Dungeons and Dragons, but something a lot of people should know about you is you're a huge social justice advocate. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do, and how does the work that you do lend itself to your social justice advocacy? Does it? Or maybe it doesn't? Break that down for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, the phrase social justice has been weaponized so much that like I don't really use it that often. So it's like interesting to hear something like that. I mean, I do think like I think you got to care about justice. I think
What would you
everyone
word it as in a way that you wouldn't find it annoying, but still capture the same sentiment? Because you understand what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to necessarily run away from the idea of social justice, but I think in a way, okay, something I'll say is I think social justice is sort of a redundant phrase because all justice is social. Like I care. Yeah, I
Fair
think we
enough.
all want world to be just, right? And we have a lot of different like opinions on what a just world might look like, but I think I think in a liberal society, a society that's based on the idea that like individuals should be able to live a lot of different kinds of lives in the society and worship who they please, work how they please, have their families the way that they want to. I think most people would say like, okay, people need like general like basic, like a basic baseline to be able to get to that, and yeah, like so that's something that I really care about, and it's something that really brought me to my work as an analyst now, where I think a lot of times when people talk about a lot of these things, they just sort of talk about it abstractly and they don't talk about like, okay, well, if we want these things to happen, like there's dollars and cents behind them, like we actually have to pay for education, pay for food, pay for income supports for people who need them, unemployment.
Wait, hold on.
Like
So you're telling me that if I change my profile picture and put a hashtag on my Facebook status, that's not sufficient?
Maybe necessary but not sufficient. I don't know. I mean, there's you can only do so much. I know. I think something interesting that you're like getting into, like we're joking a little bit about this, but like there's definitely like sort of like a cultural dimension to social justice where it's like I want to be the person who's like in with the crowd of like people who are like advocates, and that's kind of cool that that's how things have changed, because I don't feel like that was necessarily how things were like 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are a lot of people who like want to be like involved in like social justice movements because they think it's cool, and like I'm glad that people think that's cool, but if you just leave it at that and it's like, okay, cool, like I stitched a fist onto my like my knapsack and like I've done my job, it's like that's not it can get to the point where it's more about you.
I wore my Che Guevara shirt.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly that kind of thing. Like I'm basically just trying to cultivate an identity rather than cultivate real change, and there's always like different elements, and like it's hard to tell. Like I try not to be too judgmental, and if somebody like is just out there like being passionate about like what they're passionate about, I try to like support that. But when I definitely know like my contribution, like I'm somebody who is like very like left brain analytical. Like I like numbers, I like dollars and cents, and like I think that's my contribution to this, to like help us think about things in a more systematic, quantitative way, because a lot of these problems are like really empirical questions.
So here's a question I have for you. Would you consider food insecurity to be a social justice issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an issue of justice. If folks can't, I mean, like food is a fundamental need for human beings,
Doesn't Ohio have a huge issue with food insecurity, according to your research?
Yeah, when I was in grad school, I was trying to figure out, I wanted to write something about Ohio. I was like, okay, let's try to write something about Ohio. And I was in a poverty and inequality course. So I looked at a big report done by the Center for American Progress. And Ohio's pretty middle of the road when it comes to most issues. It does pretty well on things like health insurance coverage, and like housing security. But Ohio's in the bottom 5 in the country state-wise when it comes to food insecurity. And this is something that I mentioned a little bit before we got on this call. A working paper I just saw this morning, and it came out just recently, it found that, okay, so poverty rates are down right now because of the CARES Act and because of the federal support that came in.
Okay.
We've actually seen poverty rates go down during COVID because of all the income support that wasn't there before. But food insecurity rates have tripled in the United States. So folks are, they're getting money, but a lot of them are saving it because they don't think that more money is going to come later. And they think that, right now we're at 10% unemployment nationwide. And when you factor in underemployment, it's probably more in like the 18, 19% range. So if we're dealing with that level of unemployment and people don't think that more money is going to come later, they're saving it, which means that they're stretching their dollars and they're not putting food on the table regularly. They might be skipping meals. They might be not having the right mixture of fruits and vegetables. And that can have long-term effects, especially for kids who are going to school.
What are some of those long-term effects?
Well, there is a good amount of research on SNAP, on food stamps, and how much food stamps have been rebranded as the supplemental nutrition, the SNAP program. Mm-hmm. And there has been a lot of research on SNAP showing that families that basically what they do is they look at people who are right on the cutoff between being eligible for SNAP and who aren't eligible for SNAP. And families that are on the right side of the cutoff, their kids end up having much better outcomes down the road. And people think that it's having that little extra cash infusion gives families a little bit more security and makes them feel, be able to put a little bit more food on the table, but also just have a little bit more security so their kids aren't stressed out because the parents aren't as stressed out. And maybe the parent doesn't need to take an extra shift and then they can stay at home and take care of the kid instead. Or maybe it has something to do with just lack of income leads to stress, which leads to abuse and neglect in the household. I don't know the exact mechanism in between, but there definitely is this line between having family resources and long-term outcomes for kids.
Well, speaking of future long-term outcomes for children, you recently had one of your studies published in the Wall Street Journal. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what that study was about? Yeah,
I had a great intern who's on our D&D campaign now.
Shout out to Nerwin.
Yep, Nerwin out there. Noah Stein came in and he had never even heard of a cost-benefit analysis before January or February. And he came on and we did the crash course and I had him read a couple of books and we ended up doing this cost benefit analysis together on school closures for COVID-19, where we looked at the risk of death reduction that came from closing schools and then compared that to the impact on future labor market earnings from missing all that school for all those kids. And ended up finding that the costs of school closures in pure monetary form, just looking at those two variables, really outweigh the benefits of closing schools. And that ended up being picked up in the Wall Street Journal in an opinion article, and it was talked about there. And we got a bit of other coverage for that study as well.
Is that something, would you say those findings were something that rubbed certain people the wrong way?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, with how controversial, we kind of got this study out a little bit before Donald Trump came really strong on opening schools, which I think politicized the issue a lot and made people, take sides on an issue that probably should have been a little bit more balanced. I think a lot of schools are trying to find the way to strike a middle ground, partial week in-person schooling and then mixing that with virtual. And the costs are going to fall a lot more on younger kids than on older kids. So maybe it's less important for college kids to be in the classroom than for first graders, for instance. I think that's probably true.
And did this study account for virtual learning, or was it just no learning at all?
Yeah, we were looking at basically no learning at all. And we were saying that there could be, if the cost, even if virtual learning was able to make up 75% of those costs, it's the cost would still outweigh the benefits, which I would be pretty surprised if that were the case. I think virtual learning, at least as we have it now, is probably not a great substitute for in-person learning. Maybe in a few years if we figured it out more. I think especially at the higher ed level, like in colleges and universities, it could be a better substitute. But like when you're talking about kids who are 7 or 8 years old, like virtual learning is not going to be a great substitute for that in-person interaction.
Well, I have 2 8-year-old twin boys. I have a 10-year-old daughter. They're all doing the virtual learning right now. So hearing that is a little concerning for me. So why do you feel that virtual learning might not be an adequate substitute for in-person learning?
I think that a lot of this, so I do a lot of work on early childhood and like childcare, and there's a big controversy in the early childhood space where a lot of people say, oh, early childhood education doesn't matter because the test score bump that they get before they come into school fades out by 3rd grade. That's like a big argument in the early childhood space. People say, like, oh, well, the test scores fade out. Well, we still see when in the randomized controlled trials that we have, which granted are kind of old and are kind of small, but we do see in those studies that despite the test score outcomes fading out, those kids who get the early childhood education, the high quality early childhood education, they end up having higher earnings, they commit less crimes, they even have better like health outcomes and things like that. So maybe what we see in our test scores doesn't really capture the benefit of education. And I think a lot of that benefit that's not captured in like the cognitive tests that we do is more of the socio-emotional stuff that can be harder to learn virtually than in person. I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about with improv. Like, it's not the same doing improv on Zoom as in person. It's still fun. It's still like pretty good. So like maybe there's some benefit there, but it's not the same social interaction as being in person with someone. And we've had that conversation about Dungeons and Dragons. Like we've had in-person games and we've had virtual games, and they're both fun, but you can definitely feel the difference between playing virtually versus being in person with people.
I like that you connected it to that, because I did approach Rob because we've been doing some virtual Dungeons and Dragons, and I did find myself being a lot less engaged, a lot more distracted. It was a lot harder for me to focus. And I even said to you, even if we're doing remote, I think I want to come over by you so that at least, even if we're on our laptops, I'm getting that social interaction with someone else who's doing it, because I felt it would keep me more engaged. So to think, that's Dungeons and Dragons, but honestly, the parallels probably are there with education.
And that's a fun thing to do that we're doing for fun on our free time. And we're in our 30s.
Yeah, we're in our 30s. You're right.
Think of if you were trying to learn your times tables and you're 8 years old, and you're trying to do that virtually.
So something that's helped my children. So I started a YouTube channel for them. I like to do stuff like this. I'm trying to nurture that in them. So now when I hear them doing their Zoom school, they talk to all their classmates like it's their YouTube audience. They sound like they're making a YouTube video, and it's the funniest thing.
That's awesome.
But at the same time, I feel like I properly equipped them for this new Zoom world. They feel so ready and prepared for it because of having their YouTube channel.
Yo, and you want to hear something crazy? We talked about social justice and disparities.
Mm-hmm.
We're here in Columbus. Columbus is one of the best places for internet connectivity in the state of Ohio. I was talking to a former director of the Department of Health on Friday last week, and he told me that the Superintendents Association of Appalachia said that oh my God, I want to get this number right. It was at least 60% of students in Appalachia haven't had interaction with an educator since March.
Oh, wow. Since March.
Yep. Because their internet connectivity is so bad in Appalachia because, you can't even get, we were just out there in the hills in Hocking County last week. We couldn't even get on the phone with each other, No,
we couldn't.
And they've got some situations down there where they will drive a bus into like a parking lot in like the McDonald's, and they will set up a like a wireless, and then tell all the kids to just drive up in their cars and like park around the bus and do their homework in their cars. And that's the best thing to have for education there, you know. And like, you know, we've got to like, it's a tough thing to try to do this substitute virtual learning, but when you don't even have that virtual learning as a substitute, that's going to be even worse.
So I have a question for you. What is the value of a statistical life?
Great question. Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit beforehand. So in the this has been a really important topic of discussion during COVID-19, because a lot of people have been trying to do some of these cost-benefit analyses on COVID interventions. And there's a probably the most controversial topic in cost-benefit analysis is the value of a statistical life. This concept started out in the 1950s because the Air Force went to, I think it was the Rand Corporation. I'm pretty sure it's the Rand Corporation, which is a big thing, a big public policy analysis firm. They're like my firm, except like if my firm is your mom and pop, theirs is McDonald's. You know, like they're huge, like they're everywhere. But they're very good. They're really good at what they do. And they came to Rand Corporation and said, all right, if we bombed Russia, what would the cost of that be? So they did like a big cost analysis on what would it cost to bomb Russia. They came back to the government and they said, hey, this is how much it'll cost. And the government was like, the Air Force was like, you didn't put the cost of the pilots we lose in this. Like that's a big cost for us, you know? So then Rand Corporation goes back and does this analysis again. They come back and they say, all right, it'll cost you about $10,000 per person because it costs $10,000 to train a new pilot. And that was their definition. That was the first value of a statistical life, was $10,000. Now, $10,000 doesn't sound like a great way to value a life to me. You know, it's probably worth a little bit more than that. So the next iteration of a value of a statistical life used in like other kinds of cost benefit analyses started coming up around future labor market earnings. So if somebody was going to earn like, say like $1.5 million in their life, then we'd say like, okay, a life's worth $1.5 million because that's their value to society and how much value they're going to create over their lives. Sounds a little bit better than $10,000, but then you come into some real big problems where like, okay, if somebody is like, you know, poor and has like low human capital, and they're only going to make like $500,000 in their life, and then someone else is like really rich and is going to make like $30 million in their lives, like, should we just be protecting these people over those people just because they're, you know, they're going to make more money over their lifetime? Like that seems like kind of messed up. So the most recent way that people have been valuing statistical life is to instead measure people's the risk that people take on when they take on a job. So if you work as a logger, for instance, if you're a lumberjack, then you might get paid more than someone who's like a carpenter or something, even if it takes the same level of skill of job. But you get paid more because you're taking on more risk, because like death rates for lumberjacks are pretty high. It's like 1 in 300 people. Like it's a pretty dangerous job.
Did you use lumberjack specifically as a marketing ploy? I just want to make that clear.
It's not a marketing ploy. It's actually the like most dangerous like common job in the United States.
Okay. Appreciate my bad. I just wanted to clarify that.
But basically the idea is that you can plot the danger of different jobs and then see how much more money that people make. And then you're seeing how people value their own lives in the labor market. So you're seeing how much people actually value their own lives. And then you can use that to value like an intervention that, for instance, reduces the amount of pollution in the air that could then cause lung cancer and kill people, by saying like, okay, this is how much people value their lives in the labor market. Let's apply that to this environmental intervention. And then we actually can put dollar figures to balance out the dollar figures that happen from us having to put in scrubbers and things that reduce that pollution. So that's a really sideways way of saying a value of statistical life is a way for us to give lives a fighting chance in regulation analysis. Like if we're trying to put in a regulation that's going to save lives, the only way for us to do that is to try to monetize it in some way, so we can actually compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. Because if we're saying like, well, this company is going to lose like $10 million and we're going to save like 3 lives, how do you balance those against each other's? Well, the value of a statistical life right now is $10 million. That's what we've found as our best estimate for how much people value their own lives. So if you can save 3 lives and it costs a company $10 million, just on pure economic terms, we're not even talking about anything besides just the economics of it, it makes more sense to put that regulation in place.
Now, this man went to a lot of school. I'm sure he paid a lot of money for this education, and he's giving it to you here for free on Point Tell Bro, the Interrogation series. That's why we bring high-performing individuals to the hot seat. So thank you for breaking that down, because I sure learned a lot, and I know our people out there did too. Now, let's go back to improv for a slight moment, because I heard a rumor that you're going to be teaching an improv class with #comedy. Is that true?
Yeah, it is true. I'm going to be doing some of the virtual level 1 online. I've never taken a hashtag class before, so I'm going to have to go out there and like take the virtual online first to learn. I want to. My plan was to finish off the Nest classes and then take some more classes in other places. And I still will end up taking some of those classes. But I am going to be teaching that class. I've been doing improv for 7 years now, so it's exciting to like finally be in a situation where I'm teaching something, to some new folks. I've been coaching for Slumberjacks for the past 1.5 years, and we actually just changed probably 2 months ago to a group coaching model. Mm-hmm. I've been doing all the coaching up until then, and we just switched over to group coaching where we, every week that we have practice, someone new is the coach. And that's been really nice for me because I've been producing coaching and performing. And it's nice to take that coaching load off my shoulders. So it's nice from that perspective, but it's also been really nice just to see everyone else stepping up and to be, we're using Truth and Comedy, Sharna Halpern's book as our textbook. And each week we pull out another chapter of it. We all read it, and then we do exercises based off of it prepared by a different person. So anyways, I've been doing that coaching for the past 1.5 years, and it's going to be fun to like be working with new people and, be doing improv with, a really great improv theater here in town that's really been growing a lot. One of the first improv groups that I saw in Columbus when I came back.
So what can potential students taking your class, what can they look forward to? Is there a sneak peek, a little something you can give them, a little morsel they can chew on at the moment?
Yeah, it's really going to be like a crash course kind of workshop, and it's going to be really focusing on improv fundamentals. We're really just going to be going over, what are the very basics of improv and trying to do some like, pretty easy intro exercises. If you've never done improv before, this is, made for you. And this is actually going to, if you take this one workshop, you're going to be allowed to go ahead and take the level 2, like whole class at #. So they're really trying to set people up to have all the like fundamentals all bundled up at the very start so that they can start getting into, the next level of stuff if they want to.
I feel like our conversation on Zoomprov earlier kind of undercuts your pitch a little bit right now. It'll still be great. It'll still be great. It'll still be fun. You still get Rob Moore, and you also get to do it socially distant, compliant.
But you also got to remember, I'm an analyst, so I don't think about just the benefits. I also think of the costs, and I'll tell you, it's going to be a lot cheaper than taking a full improv class. So
there you go. He brought it back. He tightened the cost benefit. It is going to be a lot cheaper. You don't have to deal with people outside of, if they're bothering you, you don't have to walk out of the building and leave. You can just close your laptop screen. That's a benefit right there. I'm definitely interested in taking any class my boy Rob is teaching. So if you're watching this and you're interested in if you're interested in improv taught by my friend Rob, I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. But before we close out this show, I do have a couple more questions. We're almost there. This interrogation's almost over. I will be letting you leave.
Just grilling me.
Behind this door. Not the one behind you. The one behind you stays locked. But the one behind me, I will let you exit once you're done with these questions. If you could play a character on the play that everyone is talking about right now, Hamilton, what character would you play? I know
you know the answer to this one. I want to be King George. That's definitely what I was going for. I mean,
is it because he's the most prominent white character in the play?
I think it's because he's the most buffoonish, and it is fun to go up on stage and be a total buffoon.
Okay, just again, there's a lot of rumors can start, and I don't want people saying, "Hey, Rob only wants to play white characters." He wants to go to the black and brown play and play the only white character. I don't want people saying that. Now we know that's not how you feel. It's because he's a huge buffoon. You can pull off the singing. Do you have a singing voice that you think you could pull this off?
You know what? I've been known to sing from time to time. I took singing classes when I was in college, and I was on choir for a little bit. So
Look at this. So you're you're more prepared than people think.
I gotta play a bard sometime in D&D so I can bust out those pipes.
Interesting. So man sings and teaches improv.
Yeah.
Will there be any singing in your improv class?
We'll see. There might be some surprise singing. You know who's a really good singer? Joe Kenkel from Slumberjacks. He was in our college a cappella group, and he's got some pipes. He's
legit.
Yeah.
A lot of singing talent over there in the Slumberjacks. Doesn't Kelsey sing too?
Yeah, Kelsey fronts an awesome band called Chomp. They're kind of this like post-punk band with kind of an electronic feel to them as well, and they are really, really cool. We got to see them at their first show before everything shut down, and they've actually done a number of Instagram live shows that you can see from home over quarantine. They're awesome. I'd really check them out.
A lot of singing talent over there, is she?
Yeah, Chomp Girls on Instagram.
Look them up, Chomp Girls. Now, you mentioned them earlier. My second favorite podcast after Cointel, bro. Are the alternative hacks done? Or can people look forward to a reunion?
Yeah, we gotta get a reunion together. We also got to do a show in Milwaukee someday. That's what I really want to do. I want to do that Milwaukee show.
Didn't we sign up to do what happened? Did anything ever come? I thought we signed up to do like a virtual.
Oh yeah, there was a thing going on in the UK, and it kind of I don't think that really came together.
It never came together. It was all talk.
Yeah, that would have been fun, but yeah, I signed up. I got like an email from them, and then they just sort of switched things around and didn't get back to me. So, but we'll do something else again soon.
There'll be other opportunities, and I'm gonna put this out there now. These level 1 people better learn you hate to see it. They better leave that class knowing you hate to see it. That's our gift to the world. The world needs more hate. Openly talking about what they hate. That's what is missing.
Yeah.
More division.
Yep, the US needs more division right now.
So that was all my questions. So the alternative hacks, there will be a reunion. They're not done. There's still more stuff down the pipeline. There's still more Slumberjack stuff down the pipeline. We got your classes coming up. Is there anything else you want to plug for us before we end the show?
Just follow Slumberjacks Improv on Facebook. And if you ever want to play D&D, hit me up.
All right. You know how to find them. Hit them up for D&D. Now let me plug what I need to plug. If you're listening to this podcast, I need you to subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff, because the algorithm likes it when you do that. And I want more views. I work hard on this production, and I want viewers. Without viewers, I'm just talking to myself, and I don't like talking to myself, so I don't end up in a room like this. We have our Cointel Bro page on Facebook where you can find these webisodes. If you don't like to see my ugly mug, you can definitely listen where your favorite podcast site is: Spotify, Apple Podcast, iTunes, the like, all of that. We're also on YouTube if you prefer YouTube. Find us under Cointel Bro Podcast. And how else can they find us? I think that's it. That's most of the ways that you can locate us. Show us some support, some love, leave a comment, a like, share, all of that. It really helps us continue to continue doing this. Rob, thank you so much for coming on.
So happy to be on here. I'm so glad COINTELPRO is back.
I'm happy it's back too, and just like you brought back the revival of season 1, you're keeping season 2 hot and ready like a Little Caesars pizza. I don't know what that means, but you can figure it out at home. All right, y'all.
It's full of cheese.
It's full of cheese. I did grow up in Wisconsin after all. All right, y'all. Until next time, this is Brock Lesnar. We'll be leaving now. Goodbye.